Good morning to you all. Thank you so much for joining today. Really excited to have you on board as always. We want to start because I'd like to make sure I keep to the 1 hour that I had indicated that this session will take. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for making the shift from the different tools we're using. We have now moved to WebEx. One of the reasons is because of the heightened security on WebEx. There's been a few stories about security issues across the other platforms, and we're excited to be using the Cisco WebEx tool, and that's the tool we're going to be using going forward. So thank you so much for joining us. Today we're talking about customer experience. So in this time of crisis, how do we delight customers? In this season of stress and uncertainty, we know that as feelings escalate, the need for emotional intelligence increases. And that is the same when we look at our customers and how we interact with our customers. Now more than ever, customer experience is job number one. Customer experience is job number one. Businesses that focus on retaining their customers and building loyalty are the ones that will survive and thrive in these uncertain times. It's really important that we are able to thrive in these uncertain times. And, it may be one of those things that you're wondering, okay, how exactly? The reality is whether your customers are buying from you right now or not, there is a way that you can strengthen your relationship with them. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Mucha Mlingo. I am an EQ fanatic, and I am part of the 6 Seconds Global Network. 6 Seconds is a global non-profit network practicing and sharing the learnable, measurable, scientific skills of emotional intelligence. Founded in 1997, 6 Seconds is the first and largest organization 100% dedicated to the development of emotional intelligence. I run a boutique consultancy, PTS Africa, and we are a 6 Seconds preferred partner for the region here in East Africa. We're part of a global mission to have 1 billion people practicing emotional intelligence. And we know that the practice of emotional intelligence helps to lead, it helps in sales, and it helps in customer service, which is what we're talking about today. I'd like to take a brief moment before I go to the presentation to find out if there's anyone on the call who was on last week's call. Last week we talked about how leaders can motivate their teams, including those working remotely. Is there anyone today who would like to share a tip that they learned last week that they're actually implementing? So if there is anyone, please go to the chat box. If there's anyone here who was on the call last week and there is a tip that you learned last week as we were talking about motivating teams that you implemented, if you could go to the chat box and type in, if you could go to the chat box and type in any lesson that you learned last week, or as a matter of fact, if you were on any of the calls, to be honest, and there is a tip that you learned, if you're on any of the calls and there's a tip that you learned, please go to the chat box and type that in. It'll be interesting to see what we have learned from the session. So today we're talking about customer experience. And the reality is that, emotions continue to run rampant as the epidemic continues to wreak havoc. These were statistics that I found online a couple of days ago that showed the number of confirmed cases, those recovered, and the number of deaths. In some countries, they seem to have flattened the curve and the numbers are starting to reduce, or they are having less new cases. And in some countries, the numbers are still growing because obviously those are countries where perhaps, like Kenya, the virus, is still is still moving forward, is still growing in terms of the numbers. The reality is that this virus that's keeping us in our homes has really changed how we do things. It's no longer business as usual. But somehow we need to find a way, for those of us with customers, to be able to continue to delight our customers. I was reading an article yesterday that looked at the industries that are thriving, the industries that are benefiting from what is happening right now. So there are industries where they are strategically placed. So some of those were, organizations that do deliveries. Some of those were the restaurants that have been delivering in the past and continue to do so. Apps that are online, that are selling online. I know, for example, they were talking about My Dawa, which is an online pharmacy. So there are organizations that are strategically placed or have been strategically placed and are finding that in this season, they are actually doing more business. However, there are organizations where business has pretty much ground to a halt. So whichever part of the scale you're on, there's something about customer experience. There's something about the relationship that you build with your customer at this time that will enable that customer to become loyal to your brand. And that is the case whether or not they're actually currently buying. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So welcome to today's session. It takes months to find a customer and seconds. It takes months to find a customer and seconds to lose one. That's a quotation by Vince Lombardi. It's really hard, but somehow we must find a way to keep momentum. It is critical that we keep the momentum going, even when there is undeniable friction all around. It is imperative that organizations find ways to keep the momentum going. Continuing to delight customers during a time that seems anything but delightful may require a slight shift in your tactics, but doing so will show that you care and it will maintain your customers' loyalties. So it's really important that every organization figures out how do we continue to delight customers, even in this season of chaos. And that is whether customers are currently buying from you or whether everything has come to a halt. There are organizations where right now you're treading water. Whether that's the case or not, you must still find a way to delight your customers. And how exactly are we going to do that? And that's the discussion we are having today. I'd like you to, in the chat box, share a customer experience tip that has worked for you in this time of crisis. So anything that either has worked as a recipient, so an organization where you experienced a great customer experience, or something that you have done, if you can just type it in the chat box. So share anything that a customer experience tip that has worked for you. Please share it in the chat box. So find the chat box right now. Let's have a conversation about customer experience tips that are working for you in this time of crisis. So customer experience tips that are working for you. So please feel free to share in the chat box. What customer experience tips are working for you? So recently, and some of you may know, my son has had some issues and that have required us to frequent the hospital quite a few times. There's a week where we were back and forth from the hospital 3 times in that particular week. We thank God that he's doing much better now. As a result of the challenges he's had, he's on a strict no wheat, no dairy diet. And that's meant changing, our eating habits as a family, because we are all, with him, we're together with him. So we are in solidarity and we've all changed our diet. So a friend of mine referred me to a bakery that does no wheat, no dairy. I mean, they can, provide specialty bread. So I went to visit them, and I remember I ordered some bread, and because it was my first time ordering from them, they're called Baguette Magique, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, and they're based at Valley Arcade. So I went there and I ordered some bread. And because I've not tried them before, I decided that I would just order a couple of loaves to be on the safe side, and then try it out. And then, if I liked it, then I would continue ordering from them. And I've been so impressed by their service. I really have been so impressed by their service. So the first time we ordered, I just decided, let me just keep it simple. I'll just order the bread. Their sales person was fabulous. She shared how they have more than just bread. But I thought, okay, let me just try with the bread. And I ordered it. Yeah, but get Maggi. I was just looking at my phone so I could get their name correct. And I ordered the bread. It was delivered. It was delivered by 8 o'clock in the morning, as had promised. And then she called me to find out how we liked the bread. Amazing. And so we enjoyed the bread and decided to venture out and try a few more things. So we decided to try their muffins. So remember, no muffins. And so I ordered the muffins. And for some reason in the order, it seemed to have gotten mixed up. And I didn't get what I had asked for. So I think it was the varieties of flavors. So when they arrived, there was a bit of a mix-up. And it was a genuine confusion because I had initially placed the order and then I changed my mind. So I think in the changing my mind, things got a bit confused. So anyway, I sent a message saying, thank you so much, received the muffins, they are delicious. However, I didn't quite get the flavors that I had asked for. And then I explained what flavors I had received. And the young lady called me and she really apologized. She said, I'm so sorry. Let me just double check with the chef. And what they did was they then sent the missing muffin. How amazing is that? And then not only did they send the missing muffin, but she calls to follow up and make sure that I had gotten the right order. I've been so impressed with my interaction with them. Absolutely fabulous service. So what tips are you seeing? So let's see. Lizzie says, a call to find out how they're doing. Nothing about business, just how can I help? I like that, Lizzie. So a call just to see how they are. Mary says, calling them to check on how they're coping with the lockdown. They appreciate the care. Elsie, keeping in touch with them. Thank you very much for sharing, ladies. So yes, keeping in touch. Caroline says, checking in on them, more so the elderly, very specific to the ones in the front line, sending them encouraging messages. Fabulous. Thank you very much, Caroline. Victoria says, ensuring continuity of extending services to them despite the impact of COVID-19 on the ground. Okay, sharing information, Vivian says, that would be useful to them, even if it's not a solution we provide. I like that. So I can see from your messages that a lot of what we're doing is staying in touch with our customers. And that's extremely important. And I like what you've all said, that even if it's not necessarily something that you provide, as Vivian said, or I think Liz mentioned that it's not necessarily about work, just how are you doing and how can I help? And that's absolutely fabulous. Caroline says negotiating for more comfortable terms. Okay, thank you very much. So that's a great tip. So thank you very much for sharing those tips. I want us to continue with our conversation. And we'll continue using the chat. And if there's anyone who'd rather unmute themselves and share, you're more than welcome to do so. So if you'd rather unmute yourself and share, if you'd rather not type in the chat box, you're very welcome to do that as well. So I'd like us to continue in this conversation about customer experience. And now I want to shift the focus. I want you to reflect on a time where you received exceptional customer experience. And this is not necessarily just now. All right, so anytime where you receive an exceptional customer experience, I want you to think about that time. And there's a series of questions I'm going to ask you, and then we will open up for a discussion after that. So think about a time when you received exceptional customer service, and it doesn't have to be right now. All right, so it doesn't have to be during COVID. It could be pre-COVID time. Think about a time where you experienced exceptional customer experience. All right, so what did the service provider do? Was there anything you noticed about how the person did that? And how did this experience affect your view of the company. All right. So what did the service provider do for you? Was there anything you noticed about how they did it? And how did this experience affect your view of the organization? So for this one, I'd like you to unmute yourself and share if there's anyone who would like to give some feedback along those lines. So what did the provider do for you? Was there anything you noticed about how they did it? And how did this experience affect your view of the organization? So anyone would like to just unmute yourself and share. So Caroline said, delayed check-in, the service provided upgraded our room. Fabulous, Caroline. Thank you for sharing. So they upgraded your room because the check-in service had been delayed. How did that experience affect your view of the organization of the hotel, Caroline? How did that affect your view of the hotel itself or the service provider? Anyone would like to share? In addition to Caroline? Caroline says you forgot your frustration and you were delighted. Yes, I can imagine. And anyone else would like to share? Feel free to unmute yourself. Anyone else would like to share? An experience that you had, a customer service experience that you had that was delightful? And I'm looking specifically about what they did and how they actually did it. Yes. Is that someone who's unmuted themselves? Caroline, you're saying that the delay was worth it. I like that. The delay was worth it. So you didn't mind the delay at all. Thank you very much for that, Caroline. Anyone else? A supplies flight upgrade. All right. Thank you, Tasha. So was there any, had anything gone wrong, or they just gave you the upgrade anyway? Tasha. Out of the blue. Wow. Awesome. That definitely must have made your day and made your flight. Okay, great. Anyone else? Anyone else want to share? So Frida says you complained about a meal that was not good and they made it afresh especially for you. Wow, that is awesome. How did that affect your view of the restaurant, Frida? How did that affect your view of the restaurant? Anyone else? Thank you so much to those who have just joined us. We're talking about exceptional customer experience. Think about a time when you received an exceptional customer experience, and we're asking, what did the service provider do for you? And was there anything you noticed about how they did it? And how did this experience affect your view of this organization? So you're free to either type in the chat box if you'd like to type, or you can unmute yourself and share. So Frida says, I feel like we can go there over and over again. I like that. Thank you very much, Frida. So the fact that they made the meal again, made you feel that, yeah, I can trust these guys. I can eat here any other time. Anyone else would like to share? Okay. If you have any other thoughts, please make sure just share in the chat box. I see something else here. A couple of things. So support from an arts cafe manager while leaving the supermarket with a cart full of stuff with a screaming child. She just came to distract the baby and give me balance. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you very much for sharing that, Caroline. That's great. So that means someone just saw you struggling and decided to come out and help. How amazing is that? Thank you very much for sharing that. Caroline, Elsie says that she made a purchase online, but as you bought the item, she realized it wasn't worth the amount she was being charged. She asked for a refund. She received a call from the sales rep and they tried to negotiate by giving me parts of the money back, a discount and a special offer. And Elsie says, I felt heard. Fabulous. Thank you very much for sharing that, Elsie. Caroline says, I ended up buying a coffee and a pastry. So as a result of getting help from the manager, you ended up buying coffee and a pastry. Thank you very much for sharing that, Caroline. Awesome. So ultimately, the way that organizations interact with us impact whether or not we will continue buying from them. Frida's words are, I will go back there again and again. And I'm sure, Caroline, you would agree that, you're probably influenced or you're probably skewed towards Art Cafe when you think about buying a coffee and a pastry, or because someone came out and helped you in your time of need. So here's the question, and this is to those who answered and even those who may not have shared their experience in the chat. What I'd like you to do now is share how your experience made you feel. So think again about the time when you received exceptional customer experience and just type in the chat box, how did your experience make you feel? How did your experience make you feel? I see another post. So Vivian says she was looking for a venue to host a girls' day out. The venue she wanted only provides this as conference facilities, but they made an exception for her friends and her and still set up the conference room. So they had lunch and they're meeting in a conference room. It was very, it was very grand and we all loved it. Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing that, Vivian. Natasha, while buying coffee recently, the lady at Arts Cafe was very friendly and kept asking how we are coping during these times. As we were talking, my friend mentioned she had a craving for carrot cake, and just like that, she got it without being charged for it. Wow. Wow. The manager said it was a gift from Arts Cafe. Art Cafe is doing well right now. Art Cafe seems to be doing very well with a lot of us having fabulous experiences with Art Cafe. That's great. So how did that experience make you feel? All right. So Natasha says, made me feel they cared. Caroline says, felt valued. Vivian says, felt special. So Lizzie's sharing an experience after taking a new Safaricom line for M-Pesa registration. The sales rep made me feel number one, calm and happy. Awesome. In the way she handled from start to finish with the least amount of time. Thank you very much for that, Lizzie. So keep sharing. How did your exceptional customer service experience make you feel? Elsie says, I felt listened to. They respected my feelings and were considerate. Awesome. So how did your customer experience, exceptional customer experience, make you feel? So again, welcome to those who may have just joined us. You're very welcome. You're welcome to this new platform that we are using. We migrated from GoToWebinar to Cisco WebEx, and this is the platform we'll be using going forward. So you're very welcome. If you've just joined us, we're talking about a customer experience, an exceptional customer experience that you may have had. And, we're discussing how it made you feel. How it made you feel. Okay, I have more in the chat box. So I bought a phone and they kept calling me once a week for 3 weeks, asking how my experience with the phone was. I ended up passing there just to buy a phone back cover for my hubby, just to appreciate them. I felt special. So that touching base weekly resulted in an additional sale. Wow, awesome. Thank you very much for that, Frida. So keep sharing. How did your experience make you feel? Keep sharing that as we go along. In a customer environment, feelings are a driver of performance. In a customer environment, feelings are a driver of decision making. In a customer environment, feelings are a driver of purchases. We like to think that we are rational beings and that we buy for rational reasons. But the reality is we buy for emotional reasons. And then we often justify our purchase thereafter. And so if people buy for emotional reasons, then we need to develop greater emotional intelligence and become smart about feelings, smart about connecting with our customers' feelings. Emotional intelligence helps us to experience our feelings deeply, validating them, while at the same time being able to act in alignment with our values. Emotional intelligence also helps us to be able to look beyond a person's behavior to what may be an underlying problem. And this is great when we are having challenges with our customers. The reality is that we must connect with our customers emotionally. And that is when we are able to drive loyalty. And remember what I said when I started. This is whether your customers are currently buying from you because you are in the kind of industry where right now people are making purchases, or whether the customer has put you on hold because right now is not the time for them to buy. It doesn't matter. You need to ensure that you are still connecting with your customers on an emotional level. And that is the only way that you will be able to drive loyalty, even in this time of crisis. Victoria has shared that she visited Carrefour the other day and noticed that above checking your temperature and providing sanitizers, they're also providing gloves. Yes, I noticed that as well. Was quite impressed, as I had not experienced this, in any other supermarket. Actually, Carrefour have been in the front line of providing safety for customers. They were very quick to introduce the sanitizer and the gloves, even before it was mandatory. Now, it's one of those things that the government has said all our supermarkets must provide. But before the government actually gave the directive, Carrefour, I think it was Carrefour and ShopRite are the two places I went to prior who actually were already providing sanitizers. At ShopRite, they're also wiping down the trolley as you pick it with sanitizers. So thank you very much for sharing that, Victoria. That made you feel protected and safe. Thank you for sharing that. So I want us to talk about some things that we can do that will help us to remain connected with our customers. Remember, I've shared that in this time, it's really imperative that you connect with your customers on an emotional level. And I mean, that's not just for this time, that's all the time. You must connect with your customers on an emotional level. And I want to share some ways that we can do that, some ways that we can leverage emotional intelligence to connect with our customers. So the first thing is actually the key, to be honest, because it's only as you know your customer that you are able to connect with them better. KYC is one of those things that we talk about for sales, know your customer. But KYC is equally important for customer experience delivery. It's really imperative that you have a good understanding of your customers. I would encourage that you actually develop a hit list of all your key customers and do some desk analysis of how they are potentially being impacted by this crisis. So do some research. How is your customer being affected by this research? And you can do that by getting an understanding of their industry. You can do that by having a conversation with the customer about how they are being impacted. The reality is that in this season of crisis, everyone is making an attempt to reach out. Everyone is sending out newsletters. And to be honest, very many people are doing webinar series. So what you need to do is you need to do something that actually meets your customer at their specific point of need. That is the only way that you will be able to stand out above the rest. So you must start by knowing and understanding your customer. And this knowing and understanding of your customer starts by understanding their industry. What is going on in their industry? How is this virus affecting their industry? And then at the organizational level, for that particular organization, and then at the individual level. So for that particular individual who is your contact at that organization. So at those three levels, how have they been impacted? The more you know your customer, the more you can provide support that is tailor-made, support that is specific and will meet their specific needs, as opposed to the generic support that everyone is flooding the marketplace with. So that's the first thing. Know your customer. And if this is something you haven't done in the past, if you don't have a good understanding of your customer's industry, this time that may be a bit slower for you is a good time to actually do that research. So if this is research you haven't done before, this is a good time to get to understand your customer. And I would encourage you to have a conversation with your customer. And that conversation isn't a conversation where you're getting to know them so you can sell them something. You're just getting to know your customer just so you can support them. You know, when I was asking some customer experience tips earlier, one of the things I think it's Lizzie shared was that, you know, she's calling customers just to see how they are doing. How are you doing? As a matter of fact, this EQ in Crisis series was born out of a conversation with a customer who I was having a conversation with, who mentioned that they were just feeling extremely overwhelmed. And that got me thinking about what I can do for that customer and for my community. And so we began the EQ in Crisis series, and we started with emotional well-being in times of crisis, looking at how do we navigate how we are feeling at this time. So, in summary, know your customer. Know them at the level of their industry. What is going on in their industry? How have they been affected? There are some customers who are actually extremely busy. As a matter of fact, they are overwhelmed because they are so busy. Customers like that, the approach that you, or how you reach out to them is very different to customers who are not busy at all. So, number one, at the industry level, what is happening for that industry, for your customer in that particular industry? Then at the organizational level, all right? So what has COVID-19 done for them as a company specifically? So beyond the industry, what has it done for them as a company? And then lastly, because your contact at this organization is a person, what has it done for them as an individual? How are they managing to cope? How can you support them specifically? And so when we know our customers at those three levels, you're then able to understand how to reach out. I'll give you an example of what I mean. So there may be organizations that in this season of crisis are actually extremely busy and overwhelmed because the service they provide is one that people desperately need. So organizations like that could be tech companies. It could be companies that provide or sell services online. It could be delivery companies. So for an organization like that, they may not have the time to sit down with you and have a long, drawn-out conversation. For an organization like that, perhaps the way you stay in touch is sending them regular WhatsApp messages, because that is something that they can read whenever they get downtime. On the other hand, for an organization that has come to a complete standstill, for them, you're able to touch base for longer periods. You're able to engage them. For my company, for example, I'm able to engage companies like that in a webinar. I'm able to spend more time because they have time, and I can help them to focus on upskilling their people in this downtime. So understanding the industry and the organization helps you to tailor how you provide support. And then understanding the individual helps you to cement your relationship with that individual. Remember, very many people are sending emails. Very many people are making calls. Very many people are offering some sort of support. And so you need to make sure that your support is also tailored to the individual. What does this particular customer need? This particular one. So hopefully that's clear. Know your customer. The second thing is, now that you know your customer, you must love your customer. LYC. So know your customer, and then you must shower love on your customer. So what do I mean by that? During a crisis, there are very many businesses that will cut costs. That's how it goes when there are uncertain times ahead. This is the time to delight your customers, irregardless. You need to go all out on customer experience. Leave your customers with warm feelings about your brand. You must go all out. So again, going back to the earlier point I made, and I'd like you to take out a piece of paper. I forgot to mention this as we're going along. So in the first step, let's go back actually. In the first step, KYC, it's not possible for you to know every customer to this level. So what you need to do is you need to think through who are your key customers. So who are your key customers? And those are the ones that you will do a deep dive with. So just take a minute to think through who are your key customers. And depending on your organization, your key customers could be 3 or they could be 15. It's entirely up to you. So let's take 30 seconds. Just think through KYC. We're starting from point number 1. I forgot to mention this. Who are your key customers? The ones that you can go and just really make sure you have a good understanding of them from the industry, organization, and individual level. So who are your key customers? Just write that down. I'll give you 30 seconds. All right, so let's go back to LYC. LYC is love your customer. So now, based on the knowledge that you have of your customer, you now can be intentional about how you're going to shower your love and affection on them. Remember, we must go all out on customer experience. And there are many ways that you can do that without necessarily spending. You must leave your customers with warm feelings about your brand. Remember, people buy for emotional reasons. And whether they are buying right now or whether you're preparing for them to buy from you in the future, what you want to do is connect on an emotional level so that they have an emotional tie to your brand and that they are loyal to your brand. So what are some of the ways that we can love our customers? Number 1 is staying in touch. Earlier, I asked you to share some customer experience tips, and I think pretty much all of you talked about how you are going out of your way to stay in touch. So stay in touch with your customers. But now, you don't just stay in touch on a blanket thing. Staying in touch is not sending out a mass email. Staying in touch on an individual level. Based on the knowledge that you have of your customer, based on the KYC that you have done, establish a plan to regularly communicate. Do not add to the noise, as emails about COVID-19 are already flooding people's inboxes. Find a healthy balance. Make your communication purposeful, timely, and helpful to that particular customer. So that's why you must do your KYC, knowing your customer all the way down from the industry, organization to the individual level. And then based on that, develop a communication plan. So you will communicate to all and sundry, to the marketplace, perhaps on social media. And that is where you will do all your communications. You will just send out something that is a bit more of a blanket approach. But for your key customers, there must be a customized approach. And that customized approach depends on your knowledge of that customer. How are you staying in touch? So what I'd like you to do is just have a look at your key customers And remember, the activities we do during the session, we don't necessarily have the time to go into detail now to finish everything, but just make a note so that after the webinar, you're able to go back and you're able to refine your thoughts. So for each of your key customers, just write down somewhere, communication plan. So you may not have the time to develop it right now, but under each customer, write down a communication plan. And that will remind you to think through what is the communication plan for the customer. Now, you may have customers that you can band together because their needs are similar. And that means that you can then send out or you can get in touch with them in that band. And that's perfectly okay. But you must make sure that you have an understanding of your customers, and then your communication with them is specific to how it is best to communicate with them. Okay? So that's number one. How do we love our customers? Stay in touch and treat each customer as they need to be treated based on your knowledge of the customer, the KYC. So stay in touch. The other thing that you can do to love your customers is to focus on the little things. True delight is experienced when there is an element of surprise. As such, now is not the time to maintain the status quo. Rather, it's time to think creatively. Think outside the box about how you can surprise your customers in little and big ways. So how can you do those little things that will blow your customer's mind? If I go back to the chat, I can't remember who shared. I think, let me go back in the chat. Oh, wow, and I see a few more. All right, I will share those just now. For those who joined us later, we were sharing earlier about some experiences that you've had, some customer experiences, some delightful customer experiences that you've had and how they made you feel. So there is one that I was trying to go back to. Okay, I can't find it now. I'll look for it later. But basically, someone shared that they were at Art Cafe and they were, I guess, getting something, and a friend talked about a craving for carrot cake, and the manager gave it for free. Little ways that you can delight customers. All right. What are some of the little ways? And I mean, that was something that was impromptu, but there are ways you can do it intentionally. So going back to some of the experiences, let me quickly share. Irene shared earlier that she accidentally broke a glass at a Naivas store. The manager came down after the incident was reported to him. Instead of charging me for them, he gave me the entire 6-pack. Oh wow, I always go to shop at that store. Made me feel great. That is amazing. Yes, you would expect that if you break something, someone is definitely going to tell you to pay for it. But they actually gave you the rest of the pack. Wow. Elsie accidentally broke a bottle of habanero sauce, alerted one of the staff, who went and informed the manager. The manager told me to pay for it. Yes. So, yes, I think you should stop using that shop, whoever they were, and frequent Naivas instead. Yes, exactly. So we're talking about customer experience, and we're talking about how we can love our customers. I'm mindful that time is fast spent, so let me quickly move along. Because I want to share another tip on how we can love our customers. So the last one is enhanced support. So whatever support you're providing to customers who have already bought from you, so your existing customers, whatever support you're providing, enhance it. Go over the top. So I think it's Frida who shared how she bought a phone, and for 3 weeks they were calling on a weekly basis to check how her experience with the phone is. Whatever you're doing right now to support your existing customers, whether it's from a technical perspective or however it is you're supporting them, you need to put your support on steroids. Your support needs to just be exceptional. You need to go out of your way to ensure that the support you're providing for your customers is amazing. So what does that mean? Communicate clearly, communicate frequently, provide frequent updates where necessary. Just be reliable when customers are reaching out because they have issues, solve the problems quickly. So give and shower love on your customers. So remember, we're talking about ways that we can ensure our customers have an exceptional experience and they are delighted in the service we provide. And in this second tip, we're talking about loving our customers. So go back to your key client. You wrote down stay in touch. So you wrote down communication plan. I'd like you to also write down little things. So write down little things. So after this session, I'd like you to go back to where you've written these notes and just identify what little things you can do for each and every one of your key customers. What little things can you do for each and every one of your key customers? The next thing, I talked about this, sorry. Tip number 3 is enhanced support. All right, as I mentioned. So whatever support you are providing to your customer, it needs to be extremely enhanced. As I mentioned, make sure you're communicating regularly, make sure you're providing frequent updates, make sure you're being reliable. If you are still serving customers, if you're delivering to them, follow up when you make the delivery. Has whatever it is arrived? Are they happy with what they've received? Are they happy with the service that you have given? So ensure that your support is enhanced. And right now, if you're one of those who's in the kind of industries where you are really busy, support and enhancing it can actually become a bit complicated because you're busy, right? You're busy. Maybe you're delivering a particular service, but you need to find a way to make sure that you are still enhancing the support you give. Earlier, I shared about the bakery where I'm buying my no dairy bread for my son. And how after every order, they call and ask, how did you enjoy every new thing that we try? How did you enjoy it? Were there any issues? And where there's problems, they are very quick to solve the problems. So that's what you want to do. You want to make sure that the support you're providing to existing customers is enhanced. The reality is that we buy for emotional reasons. You know it. You will all agree, or you can all share a time where you went into an establishment intending to make a purchase and you left without buying, not because they didn't have what you needed, but because of the way that you were treated by the individual who was selling. The experience our customers have is essential, is extremely important. And right now, it's not business as usual. And so the service that we are extending to our customers needs to be mind-blowing. Whenever we're doing our customer service training, our customer experience training, I always share a story I read about an experience at Virgin. So Richard Branson is the one who narrates this story. And you will know that Virgin is known for going all out when it comes to customer experience. So there was a flight, it was a while ago. It was the time where British Airways still flew the Concorde flight from London to New York. So Virgin Atlantic had a particular passenger who was traveling with them to New York on business. He was in the lounge until their flight was called, went in, got on the flight and sat down. When he sat down and the flight was now ready to take off, he realized that he did not have his leather jacket. So he quickly looked around him, probably got out his bag, double-checked in his bag, and no, definitely didn't have it. So he kind of thought back. Richard Branson is the one who tells the story. He kind of thought back, and realized that, okay, I must have left it in the lounge. So he calls a flight attendant, and he says to the flight attendant, I know you can't do anything about it right now because, we're already on the flight and we're going to be leaving shortly. However, I think I left my leather jacket in the lounge. I'm asking if it's possible for someone to find it and keep it for me. I'm going to New York on business and I will be back and I'll be able to pick it up on my way back. And so the flight attendant. That's fine, sir. Thank you very much. I'll let him know. I will do the necessary. So I can't remember the exact details, but Richard Branson shares how the individual then passed on the message. The person who was manning the lounge went and looked around in the lounge and found the jacket, and the jacket was taken to their customer service desk. And the assumption was that, he would pick it up as he returned from New York. The individual at the customer service desk, however, realized that there was a British Airways Concorde flight that was departing, soon after their flight. And, obviously Concorde was a supersonic flight that arrived a lot faster than the regular plane. Now, at Virgin, they have empowered their teams to delight customers, to go out of their way and knock it out the park so that customers have exceptional experiences with their service. And so this particular individual thought, and she went to British Airways, their competition, and said, we have a customer who left their jacket. Do you mind putting it on your flight? And then passing it to one of our people on the other end. I assume that they would make arrangements for one of the Virgin staff to pick it up on the other end. And the British Airways staff were happy to carry that jacket. When I think of that story, I always imagine how this gentleman felt when he arrived in New York and found his jacket waiting for him. I mean, he must have just thought, mind blown. And I am sure, and Richard Branson doesn't share this, but I just add a little spice and sugar to the story. And I think to myself that if this is someone who travels regularly on business and is now back in London and planning to make another trip and maybe sends an email to whoever it is who books their tickets and says, I need to fly to DC next week. Please, can you share some available times? And they get an email back, and the email has every other airline but Virgin. I'm just imagining in my own mind that this is the kind of individual who email back and say to the person making the booking, if it's their travel agent, for example, sorry, I don't see Virgin on the list. And perhaps the travel agent tells them, well, no, I didn't add Virgin because their prices are, a little more pricey. On average, £250, $250 more than the other airlines. So I gave you the top, the most cost-effective three. And I'm just imagining this man saying, can you give me the details for Virgin? Because of this exceptional experience that he had, people are willing to pay more. Don't ever get that mixed up. If you've provided an exceptional experience, if you've blown their minds, and now is the time to blow your customers' mind. For those of you where business has come to a standstill, and you're stressing about how you will survive, I want to encourage you. Yes, we are in very uncertain times, and they are very scary times. But unless you're saying that you want to pack up your business, I want to encourage you to use this time to actually focus on your customers, to actually focus on delighting them, to focus on connecting with them in such a way that when things get better, there is no doubt in their mind who they're doing business with. And what that is leveraging emotional intelligence, being smart with our feelings, understanding that people buy for emotional reasons. And so we must make the emotional investment now. And it's an investment you have to make. It's an investment in your time and perhaps even in some small budget. But I am convinced that any investment made right now that helps you to delight your customers, that helps you to give them a wow experience, I'm convinced it's an investment that will pay off. And, as I keep saying in all these webinars, I'm not sharing things that I'm talking about theoretically. I'm just sharing what I'm doing. And what I'm doing is I am going out of my way to blow my customers. Emotional intelligence is about being more aware, being more intentional, and being more purposeful. And I think for me, something that we must be intentional and purposeful about is connecting with our customers. So it's really important to make sure that you connect with your customers. When crisis hits and times get tough, be a person your customers can lean on. Create an agile way of working. Be ready to act accordingly with your customers, for your customers. Keep sight of the opportunities. If your eyes are focused on the roadblocks, you may miss the opportunities that arise. And the most important thing, stay home, stay safe, and wash your hands. Thank you so much for your time. I really have overshot. I usually like to leave at least 10 minutes for questions, but I will take questions now. And if there's anyone who has questions that you want to ask and it takes us past the hour, I'm more than happy to stay here. So thank you so much for participating in today's webinar.